Hello, everyone. I'm Jessie Walker, the Director of Career Education here at Columbus College of Art and Design, a nonprofit art and design college that has been a creative force within Central Ohio for more than 140 years. I manage the student experience for CCAD's brand new NPS in retail design program that just launched this past spring. I also oversee the adult professional learning program. My background is in learning experience design, and I'm thrilled to talk with these two awesome UX design professionals today. So let me introduce Sarah Riedel, Senior UX Designer at ZoCo Design. She graduated from OSU, and that's Ohio State University, in 2017, and quickly joined the ZoCo as a designer. Over the past 5 years, Sarah has grown in her love of research, both qualitative and quantitative, and now runs the research practice at ZoCo. All right. Also joining us today is Josh Waltz, a CCAD alum, advertising and graphic design class of 2016. Josh is the Associate Director of UX at ZoCo Design. After graduating from CCAD, he started his career at ZoCo as a graphic designer with a focus on user experience and digital design. Over the course of 6 years, he's worked on countless UX projects, ranging from web design to agile products. Today, he leads the UX focus at ZoCo, working with clients, improving processes, and coaching the team. Hey. Guys.
Hi. How's it going?
So great to have you guys both on this call with me today. It's our second CCAD Knows UX webinar. For those of you interested, the recording of the last webinar from our CCAD Knows UX series and more on the Columbus College of Art and Design YouTube page. I'm going to throw this link in. I'm trying to copy paste it. I'll throw this link in the chat so you can check it out. Note that this webinar today is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel soon if you'd like to share or watch it again later. Before we dig in, for those of you joining today, we'd love it if you share your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be able to answer as many of those as we have time for. You can also feel free to use the chat and to share your thoughts and questions throughout this webinar. All right, let's get started. Sarah and Josh, you both work at ZoCo Design. You don't always work together, but you do. But you have had some interesting projects. So can you just take a few minutes to talk about the kinds of customer experiences that you've worked to improve, or share an example of a favorite UX project?
Sure. I'd say like some of our favorite work that we've done over the past couple of years has been with social services or social service type clients. So we work with Mid-Ohio Food Bank quite frequently. We've done work with an organization called Ready Skill, who's getting ready to launch, I think, really soon. So clients that are looking to make a difference is really fun and enjoyable. What you're seeing on screen is, I'm actually not even sure if I'm allowed to say the name, but Carnegie Learning, which is a education solution textbook type company. So conducting research for them, which is one of my favorite things to do, and getting to work with students and teachers and help them out. Those are some of my favorites. Josh, if you want to, add yours.
Yeah. I'll echo what Sarah was saying, but working with different social services, for example, that's not obviously all that we do here, but I think those are some of the most rewarding ones that we usually find. This is actually on the left-hand side, an example of a recent product that we had helped work on for the Mid-Ohio Food Bank or Food Collective, which was called Fresh Track, and it was to help better manage and maintain the different types of customers that might be coming to the food bank, and being able to help their teams internally resource and track and better understand like where they need to allocate resources and how to get people in Central Ohio out of hunger. But we also have worked on all sorts of different projects that we didn't throw any images in here for because I don't think they were allowed to. But different very large organizations here in Columbus, making all sorts of different internal tools for them to improve the experiences of their team members working day to day, and how to make their jobs easier, all sorts of things. But everything kind of boils down really for us to how do we improve the lives of the people that are using these products every day. So very, very fun to work on.
I love that. I love all the meaningful work that you're using UX for. It's not, yes, there's text, there's apps all over the place, there's websites, all the different technology you possibly could use, but you guys are really getting these awesome projects that are making like a really positive impact in the world. And I think that's beautiful. Awesome. I also threw the website for ZoCo Design into the chat if anybody's interested. You guys do have a portfolio online that you can see some of the projects on there as well. And you guys have some really great projects. So very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. So with this session, I would like to tackle some challenges for designers. I hear from design teams and design adjacent teams out there that there can be a lot of struggle in the space between research and moving forward with actionable insights to the design. So anything from feeling overwhelmed by a large amount of research findings, rows and rows of data in a spreadsheet, or sometimes the research reveals a long list of issues to be solved. How do you determine what to tackle? What is the research saying? I will add that this seems to be a big issue in the discovery phase with generative research, but could be happening in evaluative stages as well. Folks on the call, if you can share any of you the challenges with that jump from research to design in the chat, we'd love to hear what kind of struggles or challenges that you're having. So feel free to throw those in the chat. Josh, I'm going to start with you since you're mostly focused on the design end of things. Can you relate to having moments when a client was overwhelmed by the data? How did you tackle this?
Yeah, man, if I had a nickel for every time this happened, I think, we like you said, we work with a lot of different clients, right? And so I think from our experience, right, we see this a lot with the different clients that we work with here at ZoCo. I can kind of think of one example off the top of my head where we actually recently in this past year helped a very young startup. And they were working to try and improve the immigration experience for different people coming into the country and supporting their families back at home. And they had all of these great ideas and great insights from just talking to people, and they wanted to I want to do it all, right? Like, how do we get it all done? How do we accomplish all these different things? They kind of wanted to get everything done like right away, right? Mm-hmm. But we kind of wear our design thinking hat here, and we kind of know that it may not, there's kind of a prioritization that has to happen there. So with that client, for example, we went through all these different initiatives and research, and we were able to kind of help them through the lens of, well, this thing can't exactly happen until you do this thing and this thing first. So we kind of helped them to prioritize all of these different insights and initiatives that they were starting over their side. Instead of like, we need to do it all now. It's like, okay, well, we can build towards our ultimate goal, but over the course of some time, right? So we see this kind of thing all the time. And that's something we're always happy to really help with.
Great. Sarah, how about you? Has someone focused more on the research end? Have you had clients that are having trouble with the next steps after research? How do you help them move this forward?
Well, hopefully not if we've done the research for them. But I would say, our methodology or like viewpoint on this is, as a researcher, you should be kind of the advocate for the customer or for whoever you are kind of trying to represent. And so from a research perspective, like, how can we help this client to understand what is most important from, the customer or the user's point of view? Of course, there's going to be, some business implications, kind of what Josh was talking about. Like, we really want this feature. We think this is going to be a huge accelerator for our business. That's all great. But like, how do we help them balance those two different things and really advocate for what the customer is going to want? I think that's a great way, to help define your next steps. I also think just going back to kind of like the so what of the research. Why did you do it in the first place? And if you're looking back at your really well-defined objectives, can they help guide your next steps and tell you what you should be doing? Because if you conducted that research for a reason, how do we get the outcome of those objectives?
Right. Can you talk about the research and design process at ZoCo? Can you guys talk a little bit about how your team has built that design process, that research and design process?
Sure, I'll take that, Josh, and then you can jump in. So we have both been along for that ride for probably since we both started. ZoCo was very little, smaller when Josh started, and still pretty small when I started. So it's really been on us, like, as we've grown as a team, to define that for ourselves. So I'd say, like, something that Lacey, our founder, has done is we've just taken on work that we maybe weren't ready for, but figured out how to do it. And that has really helped us hone in on what is the process that is, the best for us and what gives us quality outcomes. So that's a little bit about how we've done it. It was hard. Obviously, it's taken a long time and a lot of processes and a lot of trial and error type work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think I hear that a lot of people trying to stand up their processes in their organizations. And it's a journey and it takes experience, right, to work through it. So what were we going to, sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I was just going to add to that, that we're not a huge studio, right? We don't have all of the huge abundance of team and resources in the world, but being in a small team means you have to wear lots of different hats. And I think that's one of the cool things about ZoCo is that everybody contributes to how do we improve our processes when it comes to user experience design and research, the whole UX practitioning part of it, right? And whenever we have a new idea or a new insight or a new thing we learned, we try it and we pressure test it. And I think another thing, we've learned a lot of things along the way because we aren't huge. We've learned a lot of things about, what within the research space, you'll often learn a lot about here are the different techniques, and a lot of people that we'll talk to and find want to do every single one of those techniques for every single project that they do, and we don't have the resources to do that. So we've actually learned through experience that you don't need every single technique for every single project every single time. And so as we've been building out our processes here, we've really gotten pretty good at knowing what is the right process or the right technique to use at the right time for certain clients or projects that we're working on. And I think that's something we've really built up over the time we've been here.
Yeah. And I think one more thing to add is this idea of I guess it's kind of iteration or exploration, where we have so many times where someone's like, can we just try this process? And we have no reason not to. And because we have no bureaucracy in a small company, that's just a reason to try it. So I think we've really, really accelerated our process and getting into an awesome spot because people are willing to just try. And as soon as there's something that doesn't work, we're problem solving or retroing that process to make sure that, that we improve it and make it the best it can be.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, size that impacts how nimble you can work. And I think that's can be a real advantage. So great. And I know we're going to dig into some of those methodologies a little bit that you guys have tested and tried and tested a little bit later. But before we move on to that, I kind of want to start dig into this process a little bit. So Sarah, I feel like the research team or the researcher plays a big role in easing this process. Are there things that you do in your work to ensure that the research provides clear insights or that more effectively sets up the designers for success? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, the obvious or first thing that comes to mind, I suppose, is setting clear objectives. And so some people maybe would call that a research plan, whatever you call it, just having a really clear understanding of what you need to come out of this project with for it to be a success and what it means if it's a failure. So if you don't meet the objectives, what happens? So I'd say that's a really good start. I would also say something that we do often is conduct internal stakeholder interviews. So that's conducted with a larger client team. So maybe you're working directly with two people but you expand your kind of internal research out to some auxiliary members. This kind of mitigates that problem that happens, which is people peppering in questions at the last minute to your study, or like, why didn't we cover this in the research? So including more people at the beginning, so you have a better understanding of what the greater context of your research should be, I think is super helpful in setting you on the right track to, define clear insights.
Right. That's a great point. Josh, what is most helpful from a design standpoint when the research plan is being developed? How involved are you in that research plan?
So it's funny. I think like every time we work with a client, we often are all involved in the room, or all there in the room when we first have that initial touch base with the client, where we just understand what do we need to solve for, right? What are the problems we're trying to overcome? What are the unknowns? What do we not know about our users? What do we wish we knew? All of that, right? And so we all kind of come with that base understanding of it. But then frequently, once the research plan part of it is being developed, like this, if Sarah and I, right, we're working on a project together, I might actually go off and work on the visual research, I guess, if you want to call it that, where I'm not necessarily talking to users right now, but I'm trying to develop what's happening visually, right? So we do these things called visual positioning workshops that I won't get into because that's not, I don't think what we're talking about here today, but style tiles or mood boards or things like that. We're trying to just evoke like, okay, how visually from the subjective aesthetic point of view do we want this to come across? And then Sarah, right, if she were working on this, would be working on like that research plan component. We're a small studio again, right? So we're always aware of what each other are working on, but as far as like actual hands-on and like working on it, I might not be fully involved with that because unless Sarah needs support with something. So that's actually like, as far as like hands-on involvement, I may not be truly like all that involved because I just know Sarah or anyone else in our team is just going to crush it and going to do a great job. But that doesn't mean that myself or anyone else that might be in my shoes on these types of projects would not know what's going on, if that makes sense.
Sure. I'm kind of, that's making me wonder about like the communication throughout the process, like thinking, I'm sure with every project, depending on how complex, that dictates maybe the duration of time you are spending in that research phase. If it is a rather long one, are you guys checking in periodically and keeping up to date, or is it more like at the end you then provide a report to then update everyone? How does that usually work with you guys, or does it vary?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, and Sarah, please chime in, but I would say that we don't ever work in like a silo, right? So when like that report gets generated, everyone else in the team should already know what's in that report and what's been discovered. And, I mean, people, frankly, our team, like people outside of the projects in our team know what's in those reports half the time. So yeah, we're definitely along for the ride with all these things and contributing to it. But it's like, I might not be the one talking to the users that we're actually like, gathering those insights from. So we keep up to date on Slack. We're physically sitting next to each other if we're in office, right? So we're able to kind of keep that conversation going throughout.
Cool. I'm wondering, how do you balance the design decision when there are gaps in information? And I know there's probably fewer gaps if you guys are doing the research, but I know sometimes you do work with clients where they bring you like, here's our research and we want you to design, or, does that ever happen where there are gaps? And, how do you, I mean, research can't dictate everything, right? Like they can't tell everything. Like when you do have those blurry areas, like what do you lean on to make design decisions?
Oh, your gut. Yeah, I mean, you absolutely. There's inherently part of being a designer, right? Whether you're a UX designer, a graphic designer, whatever. Inherently, part of that is just trusting your own intuition and your own gut. I think it's very frequent that a lot of the time, because we have this tool in research to understand that we want to use that tool as much as humanly possible to make every decision, but very frequently, yeah, we'll see gaps, like, right, like, and sometimes those gaps are small and they're just sort of like, I want to validate why this user would like the color blue over the color pink, you know what I mean? And it just, the way that we kind of get through that is just, we use our own intuition and our own understanding and our own expertise and recommendations there. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've, I think, gotten really much better at, really good at here at ZoCo, is if we don't know something, like if we're pretty confident that the answer to that question won't truly like devastate the project or devastate the client or have a life or death imperative to it, like it's something that we're able to trust our gut on and make sure that we're transparent with the client and that we're making that recommendation from a good place.
Right. I feel like, if everything were based on research, like every single decision, it could be very stale. And I think that's where that creativity, and I think sometimes we get really caught up in the evidence-based, decisions when there has to be balance of that, the creative. And I think, you were talking about some of the visual research that you're doing, and I'm sure you're looking at trends, and you're keeping your finger on the pulse of that over time, that probably helps inform some of those intuitive decisions that you make as well, that so great. I think some people need to hear that.
It's a pretty big thing, I think, especially depending on the industry you're in. And like we work with plenty of clients that have that want that in their research, right? We need to do more research and understand why this module we're building on this website needs to be here instead of here. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's kind of just being honest with ourselves and going like, would it be a better use of time to just do it and test it after we've made it and then see what, versus like trying to sit on our hands and be like frozen and try and know everything before we make the decision. There's kind of a balancing act there. I think, Sarah, there's like this analogy that we have where we talk about research being not the answer to all of your questions, but it's the thing that gets the ship pointed in the right direction, right?
Yeah, I like that. I think, well, I'm just going to move on. The next question I have is actually, you may have answered that a little bit, but like, what are some of the pitfalls that you've observed on how research is used for design? And it may be, again, that may be a repeat answer, but I think one of what we were just talking about that, right? Like the wanting to validate everything. And then sometimes clients like hanging on to that research and like leaning on it too much and not being willing to take that leap, the creative leap. And I think, you touched on a little bit too, that, the design process is iterative. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to be so worried about nailing it the first time. That's part of like, get it out there, get some feedback, see how it exists in the world, and then iterate on that. Right. So, but if there's any other pitfalls that you have observed besides that.
The biggest one is the most difficult thing to manage is when we get a client that doesn't trust our instinct and our professional capabilities, I suppose. So like, to us, it makes a lot of sense to trust our intuition, or we understand like which of the customer insights, if there is a quote that we should take seriously versus one that is like, no, that was a stupid thing that person said offhand type of feedback. So it's like really in our wheelhouse to determine how to use that data. I think it's really difficult when a client then doesn't trust that instinct, and that's for good reason. Like they want to make sure we're using their time and money properly, and that what we do is going to be a good outcome for their business. But I would say like, we're the ones who have conducted the research most of the time. So we have the context of the things that were said and can help guide, and we have kind of this professional experience. So when we have an awesome project and an awesome like collaborative experience with the client, that's when the work turns out the best, is when they've trusted us to do kind of our part and they're weighing in on their part, and we've been able to collaborate on that together, versus there being so much like desire for control on their end, which, I mean, we have great clients, so that doesn't really happen anymore, but that is what I've noticed is more difficult. And when you start to get start questioning yourself, like, well, I don't know, the client's going to question me on this. Like, how do I really back up this decision, or, things like that.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to explain your process to them, probably, right? Like, just be clearly articulate that process. So,
Yep.
Josh, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think that ultimately, like that, that's something that we've gotten really good here at ZoCo, is being honest with the client. And when those types of challenges come up, because they happen all the time, but being honest and going like, hey, this may not be a good use of our time or resources, or, oh, this thing really isn't what we're actually after with the customer. We can lean on these industry trends. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, and this would frankly be a waste of your time reinventing the wheel, because we're going to come right back to where we're at right now. And I think we've gotten really good at being honest with our clients and our partners on that. And just, we've the longer ZoCo has been around, the more experience we've had doing these things, and the more frequently we run into a situation where we're like, we've been here before, we know how this is going to turn out.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I had so many thoughts, but they went in and went out. This is really great. This is great to hear about your process. The things, the pitfalls, the ways you've overcome all that. But I think maybe let's move on. Let's talk about some of your tools and methodologies. So let's shift the conversation to like those next steps in finding the actionable insights. Yeah, are there tools that you use to analyze research findings, or a process that you often lean on to get those best solutions? You've mentioned you've tested a few, and you kind of have your core ways of getting there that seem to work. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I'll take that one. So I'd say more recently, we've started to adopt tools for our research process. We used to do a lot of it very manually. So, typing out our notes, writing those notes on sticky notes, and then putting those, on big poster boards and analyzing them that way. The pandemic has really shifted how we've had to work, which is probably for a good thing. We've been able to adopt a lot of different new tools. So we started using Miro. That's a huge part of our analysis process. Dovetail we use as our research repository and transcription tool.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of new to Dovetail. I use Miro a ton, but can you guys talk a little more about Dovetail? Like, what does it do? How does it, how's it helped you be more efficient, I guess?
Yeah, so Dovetail is a research repository and transcription tool, which means it houses your research in whatever format you have it, and then we use it to transcribe videos as well. So most of our, probably all within the past year of our interviews have been conducted via Zoom. So basically what we do is we take those videos, upload them to Dovetail, it transcribes them, and then within there you can start tagging. So that's like a process of basically funneling your data, making it more specific and starting to identify themes. So that's been a really incredible tool for our process, and has made, just made us more legitimate, and made it, given us more to work with, more ideas, more tools. It's been really cool. And I can talk more about the process too, if you're interested.
Sure.
Okay, well, I guess we use that, and we've used all of our tools basically to funnel down our research, which is what I kind of started to mention. So we have like a ton of research, maybe 15 interviews that are an hour long, and you've tagged them, and now you have a ton of insights. What do you do with those? So we often use Dovetail to do this very high level tagging, where we split it into categories. Then we move it to Miro, where we start splitting it into even smaller categories and smaller until we've gotten to kind of the core of the insight. And so Miro has been great in that respect as well, giving us the same experience that we would have had with, in-person affinity diagramming, without having to do this like giant process that takes up a lot of space. Yeah, and I think Jesse's going to pull up. Oh, Jesse, you're muted for some reason. And you are too now, Josh.
Okay.
I've been muted.
I was just saying, here we have this nice image of an affinity map that looks like maybe it was even created in Miro board. So,
This is actually a journey map. If you go,
oh, I'm
one
sorry, a journey
step-
map. Maybe I jumped to the wrong one. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an example of like what our final work would look like, or not final, but our final of distillation and analysis in Miro. So we've taken these insights out of Dovetail, and they're actually even working on a whiteboarding tool. So we may eventually not use Miro anymore, but yeah, just showing the different categories, cleaning it up, defining how many people or how many like unique participant voices are there, and writing a summary. So this is kind of an example of what our end process would look like.
So like in Dovetail, you could potentially tag like different pain points. So then you start seeing those patterns, like, 15 interviews, 9 of them had this exact same point of friction, right? Is that kind of what you're talking about when you tag them, or are there other ways you tag?
Yeah. Tagging is typically used to like start defining themes. So you can do all of your analysis in Dovetail. I just find it a little overwhelming. Like this is moving into Miro is more visual, which I think is what a lot of people struggle with in Dovetail. Is it's very much categorical, like just moving this piece of information into this and not being able to see where everything went. So it's harder to identify themes. It can be done, but we like to use kind of a hybrid approach with both tools.
Great, interesting. I really want to give Dovetail a try. So when you're doing, you talked about your affinity diagramming, you use Dovetail, you shifted into here, and you're finding themes. Can you talk just a little bit about what this process looks like for you guys?
Can you be more specific, like process of finding?
Yeah, I guess the process of, funneling down to, and then you get the insights. It's based on, I know one thing you mentioned to me when in a previous conversation was, really paying attention to even the participants, like maybe even tagging the participants. So you can see if you do feel like you have a really big group, it might be coming from just one person, but kind of tracking that, we're seeing this across multiple participants versus, sometimes, you can just download all those, phrases and things, but then it turns out, it might be just from that one kind of dominant person in the group, or, something like that. So, yeah.
Well, I guess like when you're going through distillation and analysis, it's super important to make sure that what you're doing, again, is aligned to your objectives. So I say that over and over and over again to my team, like, is this aligned with our objectives? Did we answer the objectives? Are we doing this in reference to the objectives? So that is what like all of our analysis should be pushed towards.
Right.
And then when it comes down to really defining what did we learn, what you're referencing is kind of counting. Okay, you can see we have like little vertical categories in this image. So each of those categories is a particular insight we felt we had. So we would count how many unique participants there are in that category. So like you're saying, if there is a category that has 8 quotes in it, but they're all from the same participant, that's not incredibly valuable. Like it's great to know that that participant said that, and understanding the context of why maybe they had so much to say about that thing. But in terms of making that like a full-blown insight, we would probably deprioritize that because, it's just one person saying that. So that's kind of some methodology. Like you have to be, there's room for creativity and like experimentation, but also remembering that this is scientific, or it should be unbiased, and it should be, you should try and make it as accurate of a reflection of what you learned or heard from your participants as possible. So we're still working on ways to kind of implement more of a scientific approach into our process because it was so scrappy for so long. But yeah, those are just some tips, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great insight. I think affinity diagrams can be really overwhelming. It can be a lot of data, and I think this just really helps getting it narrowed to get this to those points. And sometimes I think you do get those unknown problems that you hadn't even anticipated that can show up here too. So, which is always good, right? I'm going to go back up to the slide before was Journey Map. I know this is another tool you guys have talked about using. One thing you've mentioned before is even you might use this. Some people think about it as something you use after you've done the research, but you've mentioned that you might sometimes even use this to inform the direction for research.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a super robust discovery process with all of our clients, sometimes up to 6 weeks, where we're just learning from them. So we often use a journey map as a way to bring different stakeholders together from the company and talk through what they think is happening with the customer or whatever the focus of the project is. So I don't know specifically what this one was made for, but we typically define like the primary user and then just go step by step through a process of engaging with that user and determine what are all the actions that are happening from both the customer's perspective and the company's perspective. So if the customer is making an order online, what is now happening on the back end with the website, with the people in fulfillment, all of those things. And we found this to be helpful, one, from our perspective for onboarding and discovery. Two, because it really aligns stakeholders, especially people who do not often work together. So if it's a big company and you get people who are from customer service and whatever other sectors, they understand each other much more. And a lot of times, believe it or not, our role is just to like be in the room while people have a conversation that they should have had months ago, or like, just a meeting, and help like facilitate it. And then one last thing is like, after the research is conducted, we're able to go back through and fill this in more accurately for them. So a lot of times they're basing things on assumption because they've never talked to a customer or they don't really work in a customer setting anymore. So they're basing things on like what they knew when they did. So that's okay. It's perfectly fine. And it often helps us actually understand what we should even be researching, helps guide that focus. So in the end of a project, we like to go back and fill this in with what we learned. So if that's something that might work for, the people on the call, that is a huge indicator of what you've accomplished in your research. So if you ever need to kind of prove that this was worth it, taking this journey map and showing them, this is a new journey map too, so it's pretty sparse. And I bet by the end of it, this will be filled and with even more rows of things of like, oh, we learned this, we can add a new row of information or whatever. So that's kind of how we use them. And Josh, I don't know if you wanted to add more.
Yeah, because this is actually one that we did the other week. That's why, but yeah, it's a relatively new one, right? And this was the meeting where we pulled a bunch of people into the same room and we were just like, all right, we're in discovery, let's talk. And it was a lot less us talking and a lot more of them talking with each other. And from that, right, like we're not only able to glean what do they know and what do they assume, but we're even able with the other stakeholders talking to one another for maybe the first time in a while, we're able to figure out these little intangible things too, where it's like these two parties disagree about what the user and so like, they think they know, but they actually don't. And so this might be a thing we might want to look into later. This might be an assumption, even though they're not admitting it's an assumption, it seems like an assumption. So we can take some things out of this and even kind of go a step further beyond what the client thinks that we need to look into and start to kind of add to this list of what are some key areas in the product that we can help illuminate for them. And like Sarah said, we can come back to this after the fact and add a lot more into it to make it way more robust and really be a thing that they can kind of carry forward and have a much better understanding of themselves in relation to their customers and any other party.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is hard you kind of imagine when you're imagining what the customer's doing versus that reality. So I think starting with that hypothetical journey map to really get aligned on all those even micro steps through the process. And then oh, my dog. And then confirming, filling that in. And so another question I'm wondering, when I have approached journey mapping, I tend to start getting a little crazy and I'll do like a journey map for each persona. Like I'll, have a few different personas, depending on, maybe that customer age range or, different things like that. Like, is that something you do too? Or do you usually kind of stick with a kind of bigger, broader, singular journey map?
I would say I don't know anymore. I would say that we try and pick one, because it is really hard, especially even from a time perspective, to get through multiple. I would say, I think you can just choose one and generalize that person enough to be representative of most people, but then ask the participants to just keep in mind, like, if there is a fork in this process where one type of person would do one thing and another would do another, we can call that out. This is more getting what are the steps in the process. And then if we know what their emotions are, feelings are, which a lot of people don't, that's okay. We can have that, which is more what you would get, I think, from focusing on personas. So I don't know. I think we'd tend to just try and do one person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would also add to that, you know, we kind of mentioned it earlier, but we don't necessarily have a one size fits all type of thing here at ZoCo. We know that we don't use every tool consistently with every time we do research or design for that matter. And we may not use it exactly the same way. Because, like, for example, in this client a project that we had been actually recently working on, in that initial discovery process, we had asked them to define their users, because we hadn't done any research yet, so we haven't made any kind of personas yet. And we may not make personas, you know, we're still seeing if that's even the right tool to pull out of the tool belt to use for them. But we had them define their audiences, and they do have defined, I think, 3 or 4 different audience members that they work with. And we asked them, do you define them more granularly than that? Right, you'll see here, like, customer journey practices. So that's what they call this customer, and or this audience member, excuse me. And we asked them, do you define that any more granularly, or is it just like practices? And they said, nope, just practices. And we were like, cool. So then we said, who's the most important one? And they said, practices. And we were like, cool. And so then we picked that one and we moved with it. We can always come back and do the others if we ever need to, but like what Sarah said, we just kind of like pick one and just move forward.
Yeah, I think too, sometimes maybe the research, when you have participants, you know, a higher number of participants too, you might start seeing it's split into maybe 2 main groups or something like that. But I just know that I've gotten a little overwhelmed and I start getting too granular with the journey maps of, like, well, there's this persona and that persona, and they're going to, you know, but ultimately the big picture, they're likely to have the same friction points and, you know, the process and things like that regardless. But it can be interesting to see that. But yeah, good.
And I guess too, you can make the difference between what is a customer journey map versus a service journey map. And
True.
So I think the industry for a long time has done customer journey maps, which is really, really focused in on, like, all the customer types. But something effective that we've done is a service journey map, which really focuses more on what I was talking about, which is the relationship between what the customer is doing and what happens in the business behind the scenes, and like what the tools are. So maybe, I mean, that's also kind of overwhelming depending on your business, but that's another way to look at it, is you don't always have to map the customer as the priority. Like, there could be a different type of mapping that you do that gets the same result, but isn't so overwhelming because you don't have to pick from a bunch of all of your users.
Right. You mentioned before that sometimes up to 6 weeks in the research process. Is that, like, what is typical? I know sometimes I've heard people complain that organizations don't allow enough time for that research when it's just so important. Like, what is 6 weeks, that kind of ideal time? Is that your typical time? Or
Jesse, 6 weeks for discovery, not even research. So 6 weeks
Right.
where we literally just meet with the client and they tell us about their business, and then we start the research. So that is something that we've really worked very hard to figure out how to sell, because it is incredibly important to our process to feel like a member of the team, I suppose, you know, like someone who knows enough about your business to be able to give insight. So just want to make that clear. Then we start research where we actually are conducting research. And I would say that's 6 months to, or not 6 months, 6 weeks to like 2 months, probably. Like, so 6 to 8 weeks is maybe a little bit more is how long that process typically takes. Yeah. And then did you have follow-up questions? Sorry.
No, I just was getting an idea of, like, you know, how you guys work. What's I've just heard a lot about, like I said, that sometimes organizations don't want to allow enough time in that space where it is so crucial. And you know, I just kind of hearing you guys talk about yeah, that discovery phase plus research, right? Some people kind of lump that all together, but to looking at like 12 weeks, 12 to 14 weeks, and that being sufficient time for that process. So sometimes it is hard to sell, and it's awesome that you guys have been able to really carve that out and put that stake down. Like, this is important. Give us this time to do this so we can do our job well, right? So
yeah, it's not for everybody, but I do think it's been helpful for our process. And I think like something that we've started to implement is how can we get like little snippets of deliverables to clients earlier, or on a more regular cadence. So trying to engage them over the entirety of that process, because I think that's something they worry about, is like, you're going to go away for 12 weeks and we won't hear from you, and then we're supposed to trust that you're going to produce work that we like. So we definitely give them an opportunity to engage along that entire timeline.
Yeah, I could see where that would be important. I think that phase of the process is nerve-wracking for some stakeholders. So kind of looping them in as you go, just so they can be a part of, or at least see that part of the research and discovery. Great, cool. Okay, one more quick question. Just curious, what is like the shortest amount of time you've had to do that kind of work?
I don't know. I'm sure we've done like 2-week sprint type things.
Yeah.
Actually, we just did one where we quickly wrote a discussion guide, maybe in like a day or two, recruited people in a day, and started interviewing the next day. Wow. And then our output for that was just really light, like basically a paragraph about what we learned. So we did barely any distillation and analysis. So that kind of like scrappy work can be done, but
not ideal.
Kind of stressful.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds crazy. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple more tools. So you guys have your impact effort exercise. And so this is around that idea where you might get a ton of findings. Where do you start? What should be worked on? What recommendations do you make to where to start, I guess? So do you want to talk a little bit about what you do here?
Yeah, I can take this one. So this is actually maybe the part where it starts to converge again, right? With we need to create something. We are a design studio after all, and so we frequently, right, we'll find out, we'll get these learnings, these takeaways from the users, from the clients, right? And from that, we can start to just generate all these ideas of how can we solve these problems. And we have these little findings, and then we kind of go, oh, that would be, how could we solve that? Oh, we could have a blue sky session, and we could think of like 20 different ways that we could probably solve a problem, right? And it's kind of this really cool little iterative process that not iterative rather, but more like collaborative, right? We'll get together in a room with ourselves and engineers, for example, that actually might be creating the product in the end, right? So if it's, let's say it's a digital product, it's a web app for this company, and we'll get together with the engineers who are going to actually develop and code the thing, and we'll take some ideas to them of, okay, hey, we have this idea for, you can kind of read it left to right. We have this idea for a feature. The reason this feature exists is because it helps the user do this, or we learned this thing that this feature would solve, or something like that. We usually, and kind of this is that part I talked about earlier, where like I might go one way and start to define some more subjective stuff. We might have goals that comes out of that, right? So we might have goals that either the client has identified early on, or that we've identified throughout the process, or hey, you have this branding challenge, or this challenge with usability. We need to make sure that throughout the process of this project, we are holding ourselves accountable to improving your brand in this way, or improving the usability of your product in this way, or creating this opportunity for improvement for your customers, or something like that. And we'll tag the features with those. And then usually with the engineers in the room, and sometimes even the client, we'll start to define, what's a low complexity, what's like the most scrappy, quick way we could create that feature. And then what's the most high complexity version that we and the engineering partner are comfortable delivering to that client as well. And so we can kind of create this spectrum of complexity where we moving into the design phases after the fact, we can start to have our guardrails now. And we know we can agree that we're going to create this second row down. We know we're going to create an emotion tracking feature for this product. The lowest complexity version of emotion tracking is just a text field that they'll enter in how they're feeling today and hit send. The high complexity version of that is something else, right? And so we have our guardrails, and so moving into the future, we can start to play within those guardrails in that design process. This is a really cool thing that we do that where we start to transition our learnings into what actually comes out of that.
Right. I love this because, it's like, I'm sure everyone wants the high complexity version, but you have to be realistic. And so, it's like give and take, right? Like, okay, here's something that has a really great impact. It's going to be a big lift, but it's worthwhile. Whereas here, maybe lower impact, let's go with the low complexity version, just kind of trading off with depending on the resources available. So I think this is a really great deliverable to have for a client to really help get those priorities sorted out. So
yeah, 100%. And like we'll and I know that you and I actually were talking before the call a little bit. We'll actually really rapidly or really quickly, we might do like an impact effort matrix to figure out where that where we actually want to play within that. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, like this is a high impact and low effort, like quick win, right? So where you start identify where those time wasters, the money pits are with the high effort and low impact. So I think this is a great visual. I've used this with stakeholders when it's like they want everything. It's like they don't understand what goes into developing that feature or building that thing. You can kind of map this out, and it kind of almost like helps people. We do post-it notes on here, helps people like, okay, we're gonna deprioritize this down here in the low impact. Yeah.
I will say, Josh, the thing that you were just talking about, I think could be a helpful second step oftentimes from the impact and effort matrix, because I've experienced where we've done this before, and then the client just says everything's medium impact and medium effort, or the engineer says that, and they're not willing to, whoever it is not willing to talk it through with you about why, and we need to prioritize something. So I think like if that ends up happening, this is like a good secondary step of like, okay, it's actually not a choice to not build this feature. Right. You have to help me decide whether it is a low or high complexity, or like what are the two different versions that we can build, with the expectation that then like you have to build it this way. So I think this is like almost like if you have people that are understanding the concept and like good at collaborating, that second one that could be great. This, I think, really bolsters your argument and is like a good conversation starter for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I have done this matrix where I've added the medium layers in here, and it does get a little, people like they don't want to commit and they want to land on the medium. So I kind of like the floor grid a little better because it forces you a little bit, and then you get the stickies on the line because they can't commit, so there's no medium. So yeah, definitely.
And sometimes like this can even like the way that this is just a personal thing. So this is maybe not ZoCo's perspective. This is maybe Josh's perspective, but like, I think that these matrices they're kind of like wireframes in a way where it's like, there's really no one perfect point in the process and a linear process where you're like, now I do wireframes. Like wireframes are a thing that you can make really high fidelity, or you can just pull out a sketchbook and quickly doodle one. And no one's who's to say when the right time to quickly doodle a wireframe is, right? This thing as well right here, even after we've done the impact versus effort workshop, right, with that more like high fidelity board there, we can align on, okay, emotion tracking again, right? Emotion tracking, we know our guardrails now. So now how much are we willing to invest in emotion tracking? Like what actually, where is that point of emotion tracking between here and here that we actually want to align on? Is it a money pit to go full high fidelity and high complexity? Is it really worth that much effort? So we can also use it. We can use it before. We can also use it after to help narrow back in again as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I haven't used this type of thing here, but I think this would be really handy to then go back and reassign. Can we, okay, that's high effort. But can we do the low effort version that's still staying in the high impact? And especially when you can assign dollars to it, how much is this going to cost to make? We only have so much money. So then like, how do you go back and rework it using something like this to rescore, like we would do scoring, like with effort and impact. How do you rescore it so that it can maybe move into that low effort category? So yeah. Cool. Well, we're at 12:54. I want to go ahead and jump forward to our key takeaways for today. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Yeah, this has been so insightful. Hearing from different UX professionals. I love doing these because I get to pick different brains of different, you guys, everybody works kind of slightly different. I love how we've talked about, working between that research and getting the actionable insights. I want to recap some great points that stood out to me, and I'll give each of my guests opportunity to share what they think is a takeaway in this discussion. So I'm going to start with the first one. Research objective equals your beacon. I kind of feel like, even though I put this on here, I think this, Sarah, this came from our conversations. You mentioned before, research objective, always keeping that in sight, and it will really guide the work that you do. It's so easy to go down rabbit holes in research, and as long as you kind of keep that objective top of mind and in clear view throughout the process, I think it's going to set you up for success. Do you want to say anything else about that?
You pretty much got it. I just say if you're feeling stuck or you want to know how to prioritize, look at your objectives. And if your objectives don't tell you the answer, then they're probably not good enough. And you should work on making them more specific.
All right. The next one is research is creative. I think this is yours, Sarah.
Yes, this is something I'm trying to spread the word on. People think research is, I don't know, boring or stuffy or, oh, there's no creativity, but I so disagree. I think it's a different direction of the funnel where research, you get really specific, really quick. And that's the part that I like. But then once you've defined what you need to define, there's so much opportunity to explore. So I'm really trying to encourage, especially our team, like, what new methods can we try? We've never gotten the best answer out of this question. Like, how can we reword it? What kind of presentations can we do to get our clients engaged? So I'm really trying to spread this message because so many researchers come out of Ohio State. We all have our research distinction, and everyone's like, I don't want to do research. It was lame. And it's not lame. It's cool. There's so much opportunity.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's just so fascinating, in my opinion. I think I started out in college as a psychology major, and it was kind of like, oh, the research part. But, the more you talk to human beings and see how there's opportunities to help people, it's actually really exciting. And like you said, all the different ways you can approach research. I think it's really fun too. I agree. All right, I'm going to go to our third takeaway, and this is yours, Josh. Research doesn't directly deliver all solutions. Do you want to talk a little more about this one?
Yeah.
Oh.
I will.
Oh.
All right. Good. All right.
Yes, I don't know what happened. Sorry.
You kept muting me and unmuting it. Anyway, sorry. So this is one that I can stand on my soapbox forever and talk about. So I'm going to keep it brief. But, speaking of creativity, right? Like, research is creative. We are creatives, right? Research doesn't have to deliver every single solution, right? As much as I think everybody would love if we could just talk to our users or talk to our customers and have them tell us exactly what to design, and we just like design robots make the thing that we were told. Life would be easier, but man, it'd be less fun. We as creatives, we get to play. We get to get creative and solve problems in a creative way. And kind of like we said earlier, research points the ship in the right direction. It doesn't collect every single answer for you. So you get to point the ship in the right direction. But then Sarah and I, like as a creative team, we get to then play within that. We get to know that we're heading in the right direction, and then we get to solve problems in new and innovative and creative ways. And that's really how we get this thing moving forward. So yeah, I'll stop it there before I keep ranting about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is really important. And like we said before, kind of it can be a pitfall to solely depend on the research to give all the answers. You do have to take a little risk there. That's how you innovate, is bringing in that creativity. It's, the research is the jumping off point, right? So I love your ship analogy. That's great. So many useful nuggets here. This has been awesome. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. I want to say to those people out there, we do have a question. We've got like 1 minute. Matthew, how has it been helpful in your process? Could you type in the chat real quick which one we were talking about? I'm so sorry I missed that question early on. And he does say research really does free up creativity. Maybe he's not.
Yeah, Matthew Moore gets it. He knows.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, oh, you covered it. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much. There will be a survey after this. We'd love to hear any feedback you might have for our next webinar. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Josh. This has been awesome. Thanks, ZoCo Design. Also, just wanted to mention that ZoCo is hiring a UX UI designer. Do you want to drop the job posting in the chat real quick?
Yeah. Do you want me to do that really quick?
I've got it. I got it.
Oh, perfect.
There we go. Okay, here's the job description. If you know anyone you're interested, reach out to ZoCo Design. Thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend.
It was great
Have a
talking
great
to you.
weekend, everybody. Yeah.
Bye.
Take care.